Welcome to Alpha as Tie, where we break down but hopefully don't break early builds of games, and today we're looking at Bloodstained Ritual of the Night.
What is it?
Blood.
Funded on Kickstarter in 2015, Bloodstained is the project of Konami refugee Koji Igarashi, the man who worked on such Castlevania titles as Symphony of the Night, Harmony of Dissonance, Lament of Innocence, and Portrait of Ruin, among several others. His name is so synonymous with the Metroidvania style of Castlevania games, some refer to the design concept as Igavania. The campaign raised 11 times its initial goal. Unlocking so many extras, Igarashi was able to develop a retro spin-off title, Bloodstained Curse of the Moon, modeled after Igarashi's favorite retro Castlevania, Castlevania III Dracula's Curse. Just as an aside, I highly recommend it. The Bloodstained beta is the build which was showcased at E3 2018, and was only made available via Steam, which irked some backers who were more interested in a console release or didn't have good enough PCs to play it, though this was also how they distributed a previous E3 demo, and I can understand why they'd want to nail down this one build instead of shotgunning out builds for every single platform. The demo for me started with the realization that only 2 or 3 keyboard keys function at all, because this build was supposed to be played with a controller, an Xbox controller specifically. PS4 controllers work too, but I had to go deep into Steam's big picture settings menu to get it working, and the in-game menus only show Xbox button prompts. In the midst of the Industrial Revolution, the real-life eruption of a volcanic fissure in Iceland somehow leads to demons ransacking several English cities. The Alchemy Guild responds by creating shardbinders, humans with crystals embedded in them to gain demonic power, to try and fight back. But they end up paving the way for demonkind to pour into the realm of the living. All the shardbinders presumably died as the church eventually slayed all the demons, but 2 shardbinders somehow survive: Jeeble, the game's main antagonist, and Miriam, our leading lady. 10 years later, Jeeble heralds the return of the demons with his fancy new castle.
It's only a model.
And Miriam and an alchemist named Johannes go to stop them. The beta stretches from the game's beginning, with Miriam and Johannes on a ship heading toward Jeeble's castle, and ending at an encounter with Zangetsu, voiced by the Snake Man himself, David Hayter.
Me? I am your executioner.
Despite my issues getting a controller to work in the first place, Miriam handles quite well, and all of her moves, jumping, sliding, attacking, backdashing, casting spells, are quite responsive. Jumping felt a bit floaty at first, but by the time I was on the deck of the ship, I'd fully adjusted to it. Speaking of spells, as a shardbinder, Miriam can pick up shards from enemies to gain additional abilities. Some of these are simple attacks, and some of them function with environment pieces to open up additional areas. Getting the same shard multiple times can power up that ability and change how it behaves, but collecting too many shards can cause the crystals to corrupt and kill Miriam, so don't overdo it. Shards can be sold to an eventually discovered vendor, and Johannes can make shards more powerful, craft items or equipment from materials found in the field, help Miriam cook food for stat boosts such as, hold on, mac and cheese? Is this a reference to when Igarashi had mac and cheese for the first time at E3 2016? Johannes can also dismantle equipment to gain more crafting materials. It's quite nice to have another option or two for dealing with extra inventory aside from just selling it. Though it took me a moment to figure out how to read the crafting menu, and it would be helpful to highlight which items can be made with the materials you currently have. Variety is a strong point of Bloodstained, not just with the various shards and encouraging exploration, right down to having its own version of wall meat, but with weapons as well. There are so damn many weapons in Bloodstained, from swords of varying sizes, to whips, to axes, to spears, to pistols, to blunderbusses. By the way, there are special ammo types to find or craft for both of these, and even hand-to-hand combat. Basically, however you want to play this game, there's probably a way to do it. Each weapon varies in its strength, reach, speed, and or damage arc, so sometimes one weapon can work better for certain enemies, and it encourages keeping a decent arsenal with you. From a gameplay standpoint, I don't have many negative things to say. Save points show up often enough without trivializing them or feeling like I'm going to get stranded in the middle of the map. Exploration is usually rewarded, either by finding new areas or shards, or extra items or power-ups within them. The one thing I could say is that the bug which happens when you collect a shard while attacking in midair does need to be fixed.
I broke it.
Will Miriam's feet touch the ground? Tune in
Find
next
out.
week to find out. Okay, I fixed it. So if that happens, you just backdash and you'll get out of it. I've seen some people say the Zangetsu fight is way too difficult, but I was able to beat him without grinding for levels or decent equipment by just observing his attacks and making use of my more powerful shards. My two biggest criticisms are cosmetic. One is the sound, not the music, which I like, but specifically Miriam's attack grunts. It feels like they play way too often, and they grated on me rather quickly. I didn't like this when it happened in some of the other Igavania titles either, so maybe it's just me. Speaking of Miriam, her face is my other criticism. Specifically, the way her mouth moves during dialogue sequences. Half the time it's fine, and half the time her mouth is nowhere near the words she's saying. It's one of those things that once I notice it, I can't stop seeing it happen.
There's no forgiving it.
It was their transgression.
Oh god.
You...
My temporary solution to this, since head and neck equipment shows up on Miriam's character model, was to equip some headgear which completely covered her mouth. Both of these seem like relatively simple things to fix though, so until next time, I'll just be over here slapping David Hayter with a tentacle. Man, of all the sentences I thought I would say for one of these videos.
In the heart of Transylvania, in the Vampire Hall of Fame, yeah,